Hello and welcome to today's episode of BRAIDAR, the Business of Beauty. My name is Jaden Paru and I'm the founder of BRAIDAR.com. That's BRAIDAR.com. And basically, for those of you who are new to the show, it's all about celebrating different beauty brand strategies, different fashion brand strategies, and the intersection of that and other elements of culture. Like, for example, we talk about black hair, we talk about beauty care rituals, we talk about Gen Z sort of conceptions of self and embodied identity, we talk about different fandoms and how that intersects with a beauty brand strategy for appealing to a particular target audience. So yeah, we just have a bit of fun on this show and try to link some of our favorite brands to the wider picture of the future of how brands can engage with their customers. So today, I want to talk about something that I feel is quite applicable to a lot of brands nowadays, especially as we looked at in last semester's season, the importance of social commerce, the importance of content-based sort of marketing for any brand, I guess, out with beauty and fashion, but particularly in this space, the need to kind of connect to an audience on be it a narrative level or a sort of visual sort of through line through your content and your branding and your packaging, and really using that to communicate what your product stands for or what this subsidiary brand stands for, and making that map onto what the customers actually stand for in terms of their values. So today I want to talk a bit about the concept of a third space. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, I just want to paint a quick picture for you. So this Christmas, I went to Nnewi, which is the city where I'm from in Nigeria. And I was talking to my cousin about how, because she lives there year round. So I was talking to her about how it is, her friends, what they do to hang out and just have fun and just to get a picture of what it's like out with Christmas time or out with, summer or Easter when we're usually there. And she said something quite interesting. She said that it's really dynamic, it's really cool, it's very everyone's a go-getter, everyone's got their businesses going, their side hustles going. But she said that in terms of meeting new friends, outside of her friends that go to the same uni as her or that they went to the same high school, she pointed out that that's actually one area where it's maybe not as easy to make friends out of those circles. And I thought that was quite interesting because she then went on to elaborate on how there's not really a space to meet people, because she was talking about, for example, she said that if there were a space where people could congregate and hang out and just spend some time out with meeting at church, for example, or at other spaces where they have a designated purpose for people being amassed there. She said that if there was such a space or such spaces, then it would make it much easier for her to kind of sort of socialize with other circles and get that intersection of people who, maybe they don't go to your church or they didn't go to your high school, but you can still meet them in this very sort of low key, very low pressure, very I guess social environment. And I think that that's something that translates to a lot of members of Gen Z in particular. Obviously, it's not an exclusively youthful social phenomenon, but I think in particular Gen Z's been quite open about talking about it, and also because it intersects with other, I think, social issues that have sort of weighed on Gen Z in particular. And yeah, so basically a third space is a space where people can just sort of be out with having to go there for a particular purpose. Like, you know, you go to the office building for work, you go to the library to study, you go to church to like worship, praise, pray. So third spaces are basically where you can kind of fill those downtime gaps and still be social. So it's they're definitely more laid back, they're definitely more fluid in terms of what purpose you personally might go there for and what they can offer people who go to those spaces, you know? Like for example, maybe a public library, like not a university library, but an actual library open to the community. Yes, people can go there to study and read, but people also go there to like just chat. People go there to catch up with, you know, maybe their neighbors who they don't really see in any other context other than this communal shared space. People go there to attend talks. People go there for like community events, like maybe different skills sessions and different, you know, just different fun activities that can bring people of different groups and even different interests together. And as I said before, like that would be a good way to meet people who, like, you know, people who you wouldn't necessarily interact with otherwise. And I think that's always a good thing in terms of just putting yourself out there, in terms of keeping, like, lining up exciting things for you to do, because I think it's very easy, especially in a university town, to feel isolated, to feel bored, to feel quite lonely. But if you put yourself in these common spaces, then just the fact that anyone can kind of turn up gives you that, like, sort of, I guess, a dopamine related effect of like, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the conversation might bring. You never know who you might meet. And yeah, I think that's always quite a healthy thing for people who, you know, maybe feeling quite just isolated, I guess. Yeah. And it's the same thing with common rooms in halls, for example, in boarding houses. If you kind of plant yourself in the common room during your downtime or in the evenings for prep or whatever, you can actually make a lot of friends that you wouldn't have if you had just like stayed in your room, for example, or if you had just not, you know, put yourself in that public sphere where people can pass through and different circles can intersect and different things. So yeah, I guess that's a free bit of unsolicited advice. If you're kind of looking to widen your circle, just plant yourself in the common room. It's you, even if you don't meet like your best friends for life, you will definitely meet people that you can kind of engage with and that you can kind of get to know. And even that in itself is good to yeah, just not make yourself an island, I suppose. That's if you want to. If you want to stay in your room, that's also perfectly okay. Yeah. So in terms of the, I guess, application of a third space, you can kind of look at it in different ways. So I guess on the one level, what my cousin was talking about would likely be, or could likely be, a space created by, like, it could be a publicly funded space, like a library that I sort of elaborated on in the other example, or it could be a space that's to do with someone's like private business. Like maybe if someone sets up they set up some type of lounge. Like I know that's a really popular business model in Nigeria, like just lounges for people to hang out, to get like appetizers, drinks, just meet friends, just hang out during their downtime for a couple hours. But I think there's a dearth of like lounges that aren't drinking focused, and also that aren't like targeting like I guess in a sense the lounges that I've sort of seen that are most prevalent in Nigeria, they seem to be more focused around sports culture, like, you know, there's huge screens, but it's showing like the football game or whatever you, and just the atmosphere is very conducive to people who want that and who want the communal experience that sort of surrounds, watching a football game with other fans and like the ups and downs of that and that, I guess that practice. But what about people who don't want to watch football? What about people who don't necessarily map onto that like target persona of like a millennial man who wants to meet up for drinks with his friends and watch the game, or just like, you kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Like, I think there's a way in just I guess as part of the course of refining your offering for your target audience, it inevitably becomes a very specific taste that you're catering to, which I do think is important, but also which leaves some opportunity for another target audience to be served by someone else's business, which might be in the same industry or the same vein, but it won't, in practice, it's not implemented in the same way. Like maybe if your sports bar is very gendered a particular way in terms of very stereotypically masculine, then someone else could serve another target audience by kind of making a more, like, making the social connections and social, like, interactions that the bar's hinged on or the lounge is hinged on, making those interactions and, like, not like that. If that, you kind of understand what I'm trying to say. It's not exactly that, the opposite of a very, like, masculine space is a feminine space. It's like, I'm not exactly saying to appeal to, like, for example, if you were to say someone in my cousin's age bracket and, like, with her same sort of likes and dislikes and psychographic, like, details, that you'd have to do the opposite of what the bars are, the lounges are currently doing, which is to make it, like, hyper feminine and everything. I'm not saying that's what you should do, because, again, as I said in episode 3 last season, it's all about actually looking into that person who you're tailoring it to and seeing the details of, like, what they like and what they don't, and, like, where they interact, what they watch, that kind of thing. It's not a case of, like, doing the opposite of what they don't like. You know what I mean? Because that's not actually hyper personalized. That's just doing the opposite of what they don't like, but you're not guaranteeing that that opposite is what they actually like, and that's the most crucial thing. So, yeah, back to my actual point. So, in having in sort of going another direction with the whole lounge business model, I think there's actually an opportunity to turn that into a third space that's maybe more, I guess, low key than the sports lounges, because obviously, like, they've got the game going, people, like, there's music as well, there's, like, people laughing, talking, and, like, that's very jovial, that's very nice. But then some people, to relax and to, like, socialize, they don't want all that, like, ambient sort of high energy, slightly discordant things buzzing around, like, they don't want all that ambient sort of buzz and noise. They just kind of want a space to facilitate whatever they want to do. You know what I mean? Like, they might like a bit of music, but maybe they like it, like, at a lower volume. Maybe they like a particular genre, or maybe they, just the whole kind of atmosphere should suit how they like to socialize, basically. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for third spaces such as lounges to explore alternative socialization, like, trends. Maybe, I've talked about the website stylist.com before, but they're really good at consumer trend reports. They're really good at mapping out different developments in how a particular demographic socializes, how they spend their downtime, like, different trends, and also the reason why. I think they're good at digging into that, and also into, like, projections for what the future of this might look like, because as a brand, you kind of have to look at the now to know what's happening and to be aware that something is happening. You have to look at the past to know, like, why it's happening, but then you have to look at also the future to know how you're going to do it. Because by the time you make your thing, the phenomenon that you've seen in the now becomes a bit outdated, you know? So you have to kind of keep that three-pronged, like, awareness of any, like, strategic sort of consumer trend, like, thing that you see. Yeah. So I guess in the sense of what a brand like a beauty brand could do as a third space, yes, one, you could do a lounge type thing where people can hang out, and you could kind of facilitate that community that's already grown around your brand. So again, going back to stylists, they are amazing at tracking like different brands, like streetwear brands or designer brands that already have that community around their product and around their ethos, and there's already a kind of set lifestyle around their product offerings that their consumers are not only tapping into but wholly embrace. Like, it really resonates with them and their personal aesthetics and values, and you see that they've already got their whether it's their, like, there's a forum dedicated to people maybe reselling a particular designer's like clothing, whether it's like, you know how sneakers have got like the resale market that's really booming, you know how there's whole facets and levels of culture that intersect with, I guess, the actual act of like buying a product and buying into like what a company is offering. It's also a way of signifying that you belong to a certain group, and it's also a way of like connecting with others who share that same affinity or share the same like liking for an element of that that product offering. And so I guess another example, yeah, like going back to streetwear, you've got the actual clothing pieces and the shoes and the hats and whatnot, but you've also got the cultures that have embraced that, but also been informed by that and been like shaped by that, and continue to, in a kind of meta way, shape that streetwear culture and what products are offered and the trends that you see in the actual clothing. So the cultures could be like hip hop culture, like skating culture, basketball, like all these things that kind of are, you know, in your head, you'd think, oh, someone who likes X brand, they might like A, B, C, D, E, F, like activity. All those things, when you think about it, are actually subcultures that are intertwined, informed by one another, continue to inform the one that they're informed by, and then all of that sort of dynamic reshaping and remixing and recontextualizing and reimagining is also fed back into the culture of the streetwear, like clothing and shoes and bucket hats and all that type of stuff. So I think that's a good example to demonstrate how a brand can approach third spaces. Because again, harking back to season 1's episode 3 of BRAIDAR, the Business of Beauty, when I was talking about how you can be laser focused on your target persona by breaking down, like, okay, what activities do they like? What fandoms are they a part of? What are their favorite sports? Like, what are these subcultures that they're engaged in, that they're you know, whose stuff are they commenting on online? Like, what is that telling you about the subcultures that they are a part of or that they kind of aspire to connect with? You've already got that information in the bank. So your third space should be informed by those subcultures. And what I mean by that is, like, if your fashion brand is like to do with sneakers, for example, you could set up like an in-person brand activation, like, you know, those pop-up installations or pop-up shops that some brands do. You can set up that, but not just as a retail space, because you know sometimes pop-up shops and brand activations are like, ooh, colors, like lights, beautiful, like perfectly branded and attractive sort of decor and like shop architecture, but it's actually just that they're selling you the same things. I think that nowadays you have to take it a step further, and those brand activations can double as, or even primarily be third spaces, where what you're actually like the behavior that they're actually encouraging is not primarily purchasing, it's actually engagement with that community. It's actually for that community to engage with like the members to engage with each other, and your brand is just the facilitating sort of platform for that, because it's actually way more powerful than you might think. Because I know it might seem counterintuitive to the bottom line of like, oh, but oh, I want to put the shoes on a pedestal in the front because, even though I want to do my brand activation, I still want them to buy. But I think consumers are a bit more nuanced than that, and a bit more like clued in than that, especially consumers who are really, really tuned into that community around your product, or the subcultures that inform your product, because they can smell if you're sincerely and genuinely engaging with the culture and engaging with their like them as a sub community, or them as a community rather. But if you kind of try and have your cake and eat it, if you try and like, make it clear that you're actually just doing this as a veneer over a huge like just plain selling thing, then they will sniff that out and they will not bite. And you actually find that your whole kind of activation is not a waste. I won't say it's a waste, but it's not optimized for sales. It's not optimized for connection. So you get the worst of both worlds, And you could have gotten that same kind of, I guess, mediocre result if you saved money and didn't set up an in-person activation in the first place. So that's why it's really important to authentically and with a sincere sort of intention engage with these sub-communities, even if it's just a case of like, I have no idea like about the cultures that have informed this movement. I don't really, as of this moment, understand it, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to immerse myself, and I'm willing to listen to, what makes you like it? What makes you tick? What makes you, like, what draws you to this subculture that my product has been, somehow embraced by? So I think that kind of approach is really, really valuable, especially in a Gen Z context. And yeah, I guess also as well, just as a side point, it's also valuable because sometimes you might set up a beauty brand or a fashion brand targeting one audience, but then you find along the way that it's picked up by a completely different audience, and they are so into it that you have to like pivot to focusing on them. And I talked about pivoting in the last season in another episode. But like, for example, Twitch, it was first a kind of very general sort of live streaming platform where they tried to accommodate lots of different, I guess, audiences. But then they found that the gaming streaming was so like the gamers who were streaming were so kind of on board with Twitch as a platform and like loved the idea behind Twitch and was so kind of engaged with Twitch as a I guess brand, you could say, that the audiences that they were pulling in and the suggestions that they were giving and the amount of like not even attention, but the amount of there's you can kind of pour yourself into a platform or a movement that you really like. So the scale of that was what actually, made the founders kind of think again and think, okay, maybe we should focus on, what the game streamers are asking us to do in terms of like in future iterations. They wanted more like higher resolution streams, they wanted this and that to better facilitate their like playthroughs. So yeah, and obviously you can see that honing in on that niche has served the company pretty well in terms of like differentiation, in terms of like actually it just injects new life into your business, because that's your key to product market fit. And maybe I'll talk about product market fit in another episode, because I feel like if I keep on talking about this example, then it's going to go into a tangent. But basically, that's your key to where, like, your audience is basically taking your product out of your hands, to use that analogy, as fast as you can get it out there. So like things are flying off the shelf, or like sales are just like ticking, 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 or your audience numbers just growing, and you're almost like racing to catch up to that demand. That's the definition of product market fit that I'm working with. And it's not my definition, by the way, but you can kind of look it up and like research more on that. So back to the actual sort of line of argument. So if a brand wants to make a third space, they can do an in-person brand activation or pop-up that is fundamentally about, look, I'm just making a space that is optimized for X activity that Y subculture or Y community loves to do. That's how you can make your third space, you know? It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm making this third space. Yes, it's like for facilitating community, but I put my huge logo like in a big carpet on the floor. I put my logo on a banner. I put my logo on the door. I put my logo on the toilet. Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to kind of remind them at every step that, hey, I sponsored this. Hey, like, you're doing this with this company, this brand. It has to be, again, more subtle than that, because if you over brand it, especially with your logo, this is like separate from using your brand colors, but if you over brand it with the actual logo, like the drawing part of your logo, basically, it's going to seem insincere. Even if you're sincere, it's going to seem, because again, it's just seeing the logo everywhere is like a heuristic that people use to try and judge if something is, not tacky, but if something is, just like brand sponsored, like institutional, sort of not tailored, not like personal, close to the culture, like in close dialogue with the culture, rather than compared to like, when corporations try to appeal to subcultures. That's what I'm trying to say. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't risk engaging with that like mental shorthand that humans subconsciously do. So what I would suggest is that third space, use your brand colors in the like decor, in whether you give away like little leaflets with discounts or little goodie bag type things. You can use your brand colors in that. And I dare say you can brand the actual like little, in party packs, the little tidbits that you get, but not in an actual party pack. It's like when you go to an event or like a brand sort of thing, they give you like a party pack, basically. Yeah. So you can brand those things, maybe. Actually, no, you should brand those things because they're taking it home and they're seeing it in the context of their own home. So it's like removed from the context of like the House of Jade's brand activation. So you want them to recall, you want that like recall factor that your logo gives of seeing that party pack favor in their room, in whatever context, in their office or whatever. But yeah, so the actual third space I think it should be quite informal, but just in a sense of like, you know how some stores, right, they discourage loitering. They discourage like, standing around having a look, like having a chat, or just standing and like absorbing the store. And I guess like, yeah, sometimes for some stores, especially like maybe if you're in not a mall, but if you're just like, I guess a regular store that's really focused on like the straight up retail aspect, loitering people loiter for different reasons, basically what I'm trying to say. So I guess maybe people want to be on the safe side. They don't want to hear any type of story, any type of like comma, like, oh, I thought the guy was just loitering to like take in the atmosphere, but another story at the end of the day. I get why they do that. But I think in terms of brand activations that are third spaces, community type things, you want it to be informal in that you encourage loitering. Like you want to encourage people, like, you can put like a couch, like not a normal couch. And I'll kind of get into what I mean by that. But like put areas for people to sit or people to like, those tall tables that have like the actual tabletop is like a circle, but it's a really small circle. And then the stem of the table is really long and people can like stand and like put their little drink on it or lean on it, or like talk around it. You want to have a few of those type of things, even if you shake up the actual look of it a bit. But you want to have, in essence, like stations dotted around or like positioned in such a way that it's throughout your space that communities can kind of actually sit down and get to know each other. Like you want that stopping to take in the atmosphere. You want that, oh, I came to sit on this chair and, someone else came to sit next to me. And, we already know that we both love this brand. So that's already a talking point that's got us chatting, that's got us exchanging WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever. And then we become friends based on that. And, those organic, authentic connections that your community makes on their own, they're beyond invaluable. Because people always be like, how people, when you're talking with like your really close friends or your best friends, you're like, how do we actually meet? And then in recalling that, you as a brand may not ever know this because you won't be in those conversations. But in recalling that, like the genesis of their friendship, your brand is like central to that and embedded in that memory and embedded in that sort of the associated feelings of gratitude and of like serendipity and like, when you just think like, what if I hadn't gone to that place? What if I hadn't sat there? I wouldn't have met you. I would like my whole life would be different. Your brand is embedded in that memory and those feelings that are attendant to that memory. So again, you may not ever hear it from the customer themselves because you won't be in those conversations, but that you can't buy that. You can't actually buy being the facilitator or being the venue or the setting or the impetus for someone's core memory. Like you cannot, it's something that I think is up there if we were to kind of make a pyramid of like consumer engagement or fandom, fan type engagement. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that you want to encourage. You want to get those couches, you want to get those stations, you want to get those, essentially, if someone just wants to walk in there, sit, make it easy for them to do that and make it nice. Like basically this ties into what I was saying about, I'll explain how it's not a regular couch. Make it diegetically satisfying, like if you want to make a third space, like pop-up shop that's, again, not a shop, but you know what I mean, like a pop-up space that is about, let's say it's about like, how people who, when you buy things that are secondhand or buy things from like Depop and stuff, and then people embroider them, people like customize them and stuff like that. If your brand is a reselling platform, like a secondhand thrift type online marketplace platform, if your activation is about like, okay, let me backpedal because I just really love this topic, but I really want to like paint a picture that you guys can understand it in terms of, I'm referring back to different things that I've read, but I don't know if I've explained that yet. So, yeah, basically, going back to stylist.com, they did some articles talking about basically examples of these really cool third space type brand activations. And some of them were around, like, again, I've used this example of sneakerhead culture, somewhere around like skate culture, somewhere around like secondhand, like thrifting of clothing, but it was just like that brand's clothing. But the example that I'm trying to like synthesize now, which is why I felt like maybe I don't want to confuse things, but the example that I'm trying to explain now is more like if your brand, like the product that you're offering, your whole business is a secondhand sort of reselling platform like Depop, like Vinted and such, your in-person third space brand activation could be to facilitate that community of people who embroider and customize and then sell like thrifted clothing as a completely like reimagined piece. Your brand activation is basically to make that process or make that job as sociable, one, and also as like easy as possible. And so again, it really boils that down to like it's kind of building off of the target persona work that I talked about again in episode 3, but this time it's more around like, okay, what are those communities that have formed around my product? Like some products have fandoms like for the product itself, and from that, what you can kind of look at is, okay, how are they engaging with my product in this fandom, or what do you call it? Like, there's a word for fandom of products, but I've forgotten it. But how are they engaging with it? Are they customizing it? Are they, making content around how they keep it looking fresh and nice and like straight out of the box? Are they, are they all wearing it to the same sort of thing? Like, has it become a de facto like school uniform for people who are in X subculture? Like, how are they actually like literally engaging with it? What are the practices or activities or events that have formed around it, or that have co-opted my product into like being part of it, or being a signifier of like whatever subculture or aesthetic? Remember, we talked about aesthetics last season as well. So when you do that, you essentially, I think you would want to write that down, because you can kind of like map out some interlinkages and such. And then when you've gotten those activities, such as like the embroidery, customization gang, then you can then say, okay, I've got this list. I'm selecting the embroidery gang from this list, and I want to do a third space type thing for them. Okay, I know that it has to be sociable, so I'm going to put the seating areas and the loitering areas and the chilling sort of like thing to facilitate a chill sort of getting to know people type thing. But you actually have to look critically at, okay, what are they doing when they're embroidering? What are the stages between, okay, let's say the beginning or the start point is they like buy from my site, or even that's not maybe okay, that maybe is not the starting point, but just for sake of argument, let's say the starting point of you trying to understand that embroidery activity that's associated with your brand, you say it starts with buying whatever cardigan from your site. Then you kind of map each stage. Okay, like, they buy, they look at the material, they look at the fabric, they look at the thickness, and then the next stage maybe they go and buy like the particular like threads that they need to use. They compare different types of like different hues, different shades. They maybe want some how there's thread that has like some kind of shimmery iridescent like bits in it, almost like tinsel. They might like have a look at that. They might draft out whatever embroidery design they want to put on not your product, but the product they got from your resale site. Then they like, sit down and embroider, and then maybe the next stage is like they use it as part of their content strategy for their Instagram page or for their Etsy, or whatever they sell it back on. And they might do it as part of a giveaway to their own fan base. So you really want to get familiar with what is essentially what are the steps involved in that activity, and then that will tell you what you need to put in your brand activation. So like I said, they look at different threads, they look at different colors, and they see how it will fit with the cardigan that they've got, like that whole that's like where the creative and like sort of fashion design aspect comes into play. So in your activation, you could have like a bench, for example, that has different really high quality threads, and you can have a set sort of number or like a pre-selected set of items that when they come in, they can work on those items and they can like just, do it just as a bit of a fun project. Like they don't, if you preset the items, they've not invested their own money in like getting that item. This and so it means that they can engage with this practice of embroidery, which they love and which also happens to be their side hustle. But they can engage with it in a fun and social way in your brand activation context. You get what I mean? Because again, like if they had bought it, if they had brought it from home, like having already bought it, then there's certain considerations that maybe like certain designs that are more marketable that maybe that will influence the like what they actually end up embroidering in your like pop-up event. But if you provide it for them, it automatically takes that practice of embroidery out of the context of, okay, I'm doing this to make a profit. And it puts it in the context of, I'm doing what I like, a practice that I really love, just for fun, just for me. And I think getting people in that headspace, again, it's important to get your consumers in the headspace of, this is not like a retail-y space. This is not like with our business hats on, even though our business hats are on, but we're not like, you get what I'm trying to say. But you really want to get them in that headspace of, yes, we're engaging with the activities of our subculture that we're already a part of, or of our fandom of this product or whatever it may be, but we're doing it crucially for fun. And we're doing it so like in the process of doing that embroidery, like maybe they can kind of go crazy with it and do a design that they've always wanted to test out, but they didn't want to maybe waste like a cardigan or a pair of jeans, for example. But now they can test that out, and now they can like kind of do whatever they want for fun, or even just for a piece for themselves. And I think being in that headspace, and again, remember, it's a bench, so it's like a work, like, if you're in DT class or like all those technical like creative classes, you've got like a huge workbench and then like maybe stools around it, high stools, and so people are kind of working on their own thing but in a communal setting. And then that is how you can also get people talking. And again, as I said with the couch example, as people are chatting, as people are talking, oh, I love that technique that you just used. Oh, I love that design. It reminds me of XYZ that I have in my closet. Or like, oh, I've seen your work on Instagram. Like, so good to meet you. Like, again, it's in an omni-channel kind of way. You're bridging those interactions and that social dynamic of like, I'm meeting friends who share my same like passion and interest, but you're taking it out of the online and like Instagram comments domain where your brand doesn't have control over that and can't like monetize that, and you're putting it in a domain that your brand has control over and ownership over and can kind of like monetize in the sense of like customer lifetime value, not in like directly monetizing an interaction like, yep, that'll be £5 to talk to this person, please. Not like that. But in terms of like long-term strategy, in terms of like sort of strengthening your branding and your community around your brand, I think it's in that sense in which you're actually like it's a monetization activity. So yeah, and you've got those workstations, and another stage that I talked about in the embroidery example was the repurposing for content, right? So you can also have another station that's like not a selfie wall, because I feel like those are great, especially for like restaurants and stuff. But I feel like we've had those for like 10 years or so. We kind of need to push it a little bit more. And we need to kind of, in pushing it, we need to look at what the audience is doing. Again, as I said before. So if your audience is someone who has a side hustle of like reselling embroidered thrifted clothes, the person might already have, those kind of fancy cameras and all those like light boxes and reflector type things, or at the very least, the person has like a ring light to kind of present their work in the best light when they're shooting at home. So what your activation needs to do is look at what the audience for that um that station, which is like the content based station, is doing already. And if they're already at the level of, I've got a tripod at home, I've got a ring light at home, I'm kind of exploring like semi professional flat lays and photography setups, even though it's like a side hustle still for me, what you need to do in your activation is to give them the premium version of that. And that, unfortunately, is not going to be a selfie wall. It could be, no, I was going to say it could be like a selfie wall type thing with a ring light and like a tripod setup that they can put maybe their own camera on, or you already have like a photographer stationed there, and they send them the pics. But I think that's a bit too prom-ish. It's a bit too like you're a customer. This has to feel more organic. This has to feel more like I'm engaging with this space. This is like our playhouse almost, in the sense of like feeling free to interact with the different spaces, interact with the different facilities available. And the way that you can do that is like the premium version of what I said they have at home is almost like a studio booth. So again, going back to stylist.com, they are talking about how different companies that are content based, like TikTok, for example, they're investing in brick and mortar like buildings, or like a shop front, but they're not selling a shop. They're not selling like retail items. They're investing in those brick and mortar spaces where they've kind of segmented it into cubicles, which are studios that you can like rent out and that are really themed really nicely. Like, those museums that have different, like they have a ball pit and they're like all pink and like have neon lights and people take pictures. That whole type of approach to like a hyper themed space where you can then contextualize your like content in that space. So you can, you can go into the studio that has like, maybe it's a like nature themed thing, or like Rubik's cube, like block colored type wall design. You can go in there and you can make a like sort of, you can do some kind of factual video. Like if you're a news type content creator, you can do a product review of like maybe a little product that you put in your bag and from home, not that you like took it from somewhere, but a product that you brought to the studio. You wanna review it in a like professional setting. You can even do like hair reviews, like, hey guys, like look, you can buy these bundles from XYZ. That's what I came to say. Like, and then you go home. So it's basically about facilitating what they already want to do, and that's why I think like the new trend of brands really listening to what their, I guess you can call them quote unquote super users, and also like influencer, like users who happen to be influencers and content creators, listening to like the level that they're at and kind of making like presenting something that they will be able to use in a way that like presenting them with something that they'll be able to use that is like the level above them, if that makes sense. Like you don't want to give them a selfie sort of corner. You want to give them like almost a mini studio setup, because that's the level above what they've got at home, and that's what will make your activation like really be like, oh my gosh, like so I can actually like, because that's what gets the juices flowing, right? That's what gets people like inspired, like, oh, I can finally make the content that I want to make, or that I didn't know how to like maybe people are like, oh, my views are not that good, even though my content is amazing and my script or my product is amazing, but my views are not that good because I don't have the equipment or the infrastructure to like make my audio better, or make my camera quality better, or my lighting better. But here, the activation, I can see there's a studio space. So essentially, the content that I would have made at home this evening, that doesn't have to do with the brand, to be honest, but it's likely to do with the brand if they're a super user and if they're at this event for the community. So that content that I would have made at home with the like regular stuff, I can actually just make it here and it will look really good. And so that is what will really like delight your customers. You know how people are talking about in terms of customer experience nowadays, how can we go beyond like customer satisfaction to customer delight? And I think that's an example of one way that you can do that. Surprise them in a way that's like not a random surprise, but it's a surprise that's more like, oh my gosh, like how did you read my mind for what I didn't even know that I wanted? That's the level we have to be operating at, I think. Yeah. So basically, you'd have those kind of stations, and so you've got like the mini studio booth type station. You've got the workstation. You've got the chilling out stations that are like ideally, I would say you scatter them around the space, not scatter as in very like without thought, but I mean place them strategically so that it's almost like the chilling out stations flow through the space, because what you want to do is you want to encourage people to move through the space. It's just like how stores like they purposefully arrange stores so that the things that you want to buy most often are at the back of the shop. So you have to walk through all the aisles and walk through all the candy and all the things you don't actually want, and all the cute stationery that you don't actually need but ends up in your cart anyway. That's why they kind of do what they do. And I think for a third space activation, in order to sort of again facilitate engagement with the different spaces you've got, and engagement with like different members of the community, try explore a bit of that like shop architecture in terms of like being a behavioral architect, rather like spacing things intentionally to encourage certain behaviors from the consumer. So yeah, I think oh yeah, I told you guys I would explain the couch thing. So the couch is not being a normal couch. What I basically mean by that is like, I don't mean a couch in terms of like, I don't even know what example. Okay, you know Simpsons, right? You know they have a couch and it looks like a normal couch in a sitting room, right? I would more so mean it has to be a particular, like the couch has to have a bit of an attitude or a personality that matches your brand. So let's say if somebody's brand is like, you know, these like skincare brands that are very like bubbly, cutesy, like or weird in a cutesy sort of way, like that's their branding and that's their like the tone of their brand, then the couch for their activation has to be like, you know, those like fluffy couches, or it has to be like a low couch that's like kind of Y2K, almost like Brat style design, or you know, just make it map onto your brand, make it like cute. Not, it doesn't have to be cute if your brand's not cute, but I mean, make it appeal, you know, and make it look like it diegetically like belongs in the world of your brand, not just I found a couch, I put it there. Because I mean, you could do that, but I feel like making the space holistic, like a holistically designed thing, is also what adds to the like, oh, I want to check this out. I want to go through all the spaces. I want to sit here. I want to engage with this. So yeah, that is kind of that's kind of the bulk of you know third spaces for brands. And I know I focused on fashion brands mostly, but I think again beauty brands could easily do this, because the like if you had a beauty brand, for example, like a skincare cutesy type Y2K brand that you know that I just talked about, maybe in trying to figure out what your third space could be and what your in-person brand activation could be, again, go back to the target persona and go back to the activities that surround your product, or the subcultures, or the context in which people use your product. Maybe people use your product as part of their nighttime skincare routine, but not necessarily as much like for the daytime, you know? Just check like on TikTok, check what the hashtags to do with your product tend to feature. Check the kind of like atmospheres, kind of like maybe places that are using it, maybe like check the kind of events that they're using it for. Maybe people use it before prom or whatever, you know, like the more concrete, like, oh, it's for nighttime skincare, or oh, they use it for like prom get ready with me. So the more concrete you can get that, the more like the easier you can kind of say, okay, then I know we need to theme it around like maybe some kind of slumber party like type theme, and like that will inform the type of, to use this as a microcosm of general interior decoration, the kind of couch that you put, that will inform the kind of like workstations that might be there. Like maybe you won't have a a workstation per se, but you might have like a snack table. You might make that workstation space like more of like a like where you would have had one station per stool on the bench for the embroidery gang of the other example. You could have like a little ring light, and then just a cute little thing that people can maybe like take pictures or take like little short content type videos, like applying something or whatever on that bench. And then you could still have your main studio corner or studio area for the more sort of involved setups and the more like, the like maybe people want to do a YouTube type video or just a slightly longer or slightly more involved video. Yeah. So yeah, that is just a really interesting topic, and I'm glad I got to talk about it with you guys and just share a bit of what I think makes it so exciting for again, like this can be applied by existing incumbent sort of brands, or even someone who's starting a new brand of their own, like maybe you're a young person with a startup or something like that. Like, I hope that these give some ideas for how you can engage with your communities that use your product, and also just just an interesting thing to think about, even if it doesn't necessarily fit into your business plans or necessarily like the goals for your business. I think it's always interesting to speculate about strategies and to just like measure pros and cons and like possible effects. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. It was amazing as always to be chatting with you guys, and I will be here next week, same time, same place, Saturdays, 3 p.m. GMT. This has been BRAIDAR, the business of beauty, and my name is Jaden Paru, signing out. Bye.